Hey everyone, and welcome back to Be Like Christ for our 5-minute Bible study series. Today we're in Leviticus chapter 14, and as always, there's a free PDF that contains all of this information. You can get it on our website. A big thank you to our patron supporters who support this work. All our resources are free. That's in large part due to expense that comes out of my wife and I's pocket. It's also in large part to the people who support us on Patreon. I just wanted to read you the countries that got access to our website. People that were on the website yesterday, just to show you that the work that's being done here is getting around the world, and that if you are supporting this channel, you are reaching maybe a lot more people than you think. So let me read this list. I just looked on the website and recorded all these. So just yesterday, there are people on the website from the USA, Australia, the Philippines, India, Zambia, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Guyana, Canada, Cyprus, Japan, St. Lucia, Sri Lanka, the Federated States of Micronesia, shout out to the Pacific Islanders, Saudi Arabia, Papua New Guinea, the UK, New Zealand, Cameroon, Mexico, the United Arab Emirates and Dubai, Jamaica, Botswana, Nicaragua, the Bahamas, Romania, Ghana, Benin, Germany, Madagascar, Congo, Swaziland, Hong Kong, Singapore, Cambodia, Korea, Thailand, Denmark, Papua New Guinea, Greece, Portugal, Brazil, Fiji, Malaysia, Zambia, Taiwan, and Trinidad and Tobago. And so everyone should give a big thank you to the patron supporters. Okay, now, Leviticus chapter 14. When did the events of Leviticus chapter 14 take place? This is approximately the year 1490 BC, about 1500 years before Jesus. God gave Moses all of these instructions to give to the children of Israel as to how they were supposed to live in both civic and religious matters. That's what Leviticus is all about. So 1490 BC, roughly. We've got several definitions in this chapter, and this is a long chapter. There's a lot of detail in it, so I'm just going to be as concise as possible, especially after our intro. Our first definition, leprosy. It's also known as Hansen's disease. Leprosy is caused by a slow-growing bacteria that infects the body, and it attacks a person's nerves, and it causes their nerves to swell underneath their skin. Then we have the term hyssop. Hyssop is a flowering plant that has a purple bloom, and historically it has been used for medicines. Sometimes stewed, sometimes it's ground down and used for medicinal purposes. And then we have a log of oil. Yes, a log, L-O-G. A log was not like part of a tree. It was a liquid unit of measure. The exact volume isn't known, but it was estimated to be approximately a third of a liter. And then finally, the ephah. An ephah was also a unit of measurement. In this case, it was used to measure dry goods, especially grain. It was approximately 22 liters. So if you were with us for Leviticus chapter 13, that was all about diagnosing leprosy in a person, what was supposed to happen if a person was diagnosed. Chapter 14, verses 1 through 32, is all about the procedure when a person was healed from leprosy. Now, this is interesting to me because all my life I'd pretty much been told that you couldn't be cured from leprosy without modern antibiotics. So it was something that if you were diagnosed, it was basically a death sentence. I got interested about that. Obviously, there are people in the Bible who were healed of leprosy miraculously, but could a person actually be healed from leprosy by some kind of natural means? And what I found was interesting. I got on some pretty credible health websites and found that there had been people who had done research into this bacteria that causes leprosy, and the body does have some kind of capacity to fight it off, certain people more than others, and there were instances where the bacteria was present in somebody, and then evidently the body fought it off and beat the disease. So there could have been situations where that happened to somebody. They got infected by this junk, and then the body, or through some natural remedy, they were able to get rid of it. So that was insightful, or it was helpful to me. I'd never heard that before. So that is probably part of the reason that these instructions are in the scriptures. So let's get into this. If there was a report of a person being healed from leprosy, the priest was to go out of the camp and to inspect that individual. If the person was indeed free of the disease, 2 clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop were to be brought for his cleansing. One of the birds was to be killed over an earthenware vessel that contained fresh water. Next, the live bird, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, basically all the other things, were to be dipped into the blood of the dead bird. The blood was to be sprinkled 7 times on the person who previously had leprosy, and they were then pronounced clean. The living bird, the lucky bird, was then set free into the open field. The healed man was instructed to wash his clothes, to shave his head, and to bathe himself before returning to the camp. But he was supposed to live outside of his tent for 7 days. On the 7th day, he was supposed to shave off all of his hair and bathe again. Then on the 8th day, he was to take 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb, 3/10 of an ephah of flour, and 1 log of oil to the tabernacle. One of the male lambs was to be offered as a guilt offering, and its blood placed on the healed person's right earlobe, right thumb, and the big toe of the right foot. The oil was then taken, and some of it was to be sprinkled 7 times before the Lord. Some of it was to be placed once again on the man's earlobe, his right thumb, and the big toe of his right foot. The remainder of the oil was poured out on the man's head. Next, the priest was supposed to take the other animals that were brought and the flour and to offer a sin offering, a burnt offering, and a grain offering for the man's cleansing. Verses 21 through 32 are pretty repetitious of what we just read. Basically, God is describing an alternative sacrifice that could be brought if somebody was too poor to afford 2 male lambs and 1 ewe lamb. In the place of 2 of those animals, they could bring 2 birds. That brings us to our second section, verses 33 through 57, cleansing a house where leprosy was found. So the second half of this chapter discusses what was to be done if a case of, quote, leprous disease was found in a house when the Israelites took up residence in Canaan. So they're not to Canaan yet, they're still in the wilderness, but they'll get there eventually. If they found a leprous disease in their house, what was supposed to be done? Well, this tells us what was supposed to be done. If a person suspected disease in his house, they were to tell the priest and empty the house before the priest came to inspect it. If the priest determined that the house was in fact diseased, he was supposed to shut it up for 7 days. And after that 7 days, he was to return and to determine if the disease had spread in the walls or the stones of the house. The stones that were affected by the disease were to be removed, taken outside of the camp, and then the house was to be scraped and replastered, and those stones replaced with new ones. If the disease reappeared after that happened, the house was to be torn down entirely and carried outside of the city. Anyone who entered the house, if it was diseased, was considered unclean until the evening. If the disease didn't reappear, the house was to be pronounced clean again, and the house was to be cleansed with similar things to the lepers that we talked about in the earlier section. 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. One of the birds was supposed to be killed. All the other articles were supposed to be dipped in the blood of the dead bird, and then the lucky and living bird was set free. The house was to be sprinkled 7 times with the blood of the animal that was sacrificed, and then the house was clean again. All right, so that is Leviticus chapter 14. I hope that if somebody comes to your house and asks you to inspect their house for leprosy, you will know how to do it. Okay, now for our application section. Chapters 13 and 14 speak to the Bible's scientific accuracy and scientific foreknowledge. Long before humans discovered how bacteria spread and how disease was transmitted, God was recommending quarantine for the sick, to separate sick people from the rest of the population so that, it didn't spread. While the scriptures were never intended to be a science textbook or a book full of medical remedies, you will find that the scientific facts contained in the Bible are accurate. And I think this is what you would expect if the creator of the universe had his hand in authoring a book. And it's telling to compare the scientific accuracy of the Bible to other ancient texts which contain significant scientific errors and out-of-date theories. So the Bible's scientific trustworthiness is one line of evidence that can be used to prove the Bible's inspiration.